In the case of Rhea of the Holograms, it's her first trip to Mexico for episode 9, so the story begins in the clothing store. Anyway, that's the Holograms, and along with Rio, and of course, little didn't they know, they're not the only ones in the clothing store because Lindsay just shows up too. And also with the Holograms and Rio, and of course, Lindsay was Video, or Vivian for short. Now, Lindsay, being the reporter that she is, has some good news that the Holograms are doing their next music video in Mexico. And so, what Lindsay wants to know from Jim if that was true. Then Lindsay says, word has it that Video is having a secret location where the video was shot. Just when Jim was about to answer, that's when Video, or Vivian for short, interrupted Lindsay. That's when Video said, sorry, Lindsay, but this is one story you're not gonna get. So why all the secrecy? Lindsay asked. Well, Video was more than happy to explain. She said that the next music video she's going to shoot will be entered into the video festival where she's attending. And guess what? She's nominated for an award. Of course, Rio looks at Jim and says that's the only award that video hasn't received yet. And Jim happens to agree with Rio. So Lindsay wants to know from Video if she was sure she's going to win at that festival. Well, Video says, with my friends like the Holograms, how can I lose? That's why Video needs to have the shooting location a secret so that nobody else knows about it. So meanwhile, the Misfits were doing their photo shoots. That was until Video's cousin, Clash, decides to tell the Misfits the good news. As you can tell right about now, the Misfits had heard the news about the secret location of Video's doing her video, and they're not happy about it. When Class shows up minutes later, she told the Misfits that first of all, she has an announcement to make and some good news. Her father, Buzz, you remember him from episode 7 just 2 episodes ago, has gotten Clash her first video camera, and she wants to take a chance on shooting a video just like her cousin did. However, the Misfits were very rude to Clash, and Possess told her, oh, you're just wasting our time. Get out of our way. We're busy right now. What if I told you that you can win the International Video Festival contest? Clash said. Would you be busy then? And Roxy says, really? You're going to shoot a video with us in it? Then Possess just told Clash to forget about it because she said that the last time the Clash did a video, it was disastrous. Then Clash says, it's true, but what if I told you that I got Video's secret location? And you want to know how I pulled it off? First of all, I disguised myself as a maid, Clash explains. So you know what this means? Clash has a plan for the Misfits. So, meanwhile, at the Alonso residence, that's a video showing the Alonsos the map of Mexico and says this is where we're going to be shooting at the Aztec ruins. Now, Miguel Alonso, you remember him from 8 episodes ago. He's really concerned about his daughter going there, and so was Rhea's mother. So, even though Rhea's parents are very supportive of their daughter going there since it's her first trip, but Rhea assures them. So, she told her parents, Rhea that is, that since she'd be going there for the first time, it's her chance to brush up on her culture. Since her mother, since Rhea had been little at the time, has known so little about its people and what they were like there. So then it's Rio's turn to make a suggestion to Rhea's parents that since their guide Luis is going to be being there, we're about to meet him in a minute. In fact, Luis is going to be showing them to the Aztec ruins. Then Jim told the Alonsos, besides, we're going to be fine. So finally, Miguel, and of course Rhea's mother, had agreed to let Rhea have her chance to see the Mexican culture and to brush it up. So it's off they went to Mexico, the holograms that is. So meanwhile there, just the way that the holograms planned it along with Rio, Video, or Vivian for short, is waiting for Luis, who is their guide, to show up. Then, minutes later, when Luis shows up, the first thing he did was to welcome the holograms, including Video, or Vivian for short, and Rio, to Mexico City. That's the capital of Mexico that is known for today. And of course, he introduced himself. Asha, who saw what Rhea did, of course, she isn't kidding when Asha said that Rhea's gonna like it here because, as Rhea's father said, it's part of her heritage. So what Luis did is that he showed the holograms the ruins of the Aztec temple in the heart of Mexico City. So that's what he did. So by the time that the holograms arrived at the old Aztec temple, that's when Luis explains that many centuries ago, during the time of the Aztec Empire, and of course there's also the Mayan Empire, just so you know. Of course, legend has it that the wise men had told the leader of the Aztecs, which was Montezuma at the time. Of course, the leader was told to have the Aztecs build a new home, and that's when they saw an eagle with a snake in its claws. The Aztecs, that is. And of course, ever since then, the eagle with the snake on its claw landed right on the cactus. And that's why the eagle with the snake is known as the symbol on the Mexican flag, which is known for today. And that's why, ever since that day, the Aztecs built the incredible biggest temple as it stands today, Tezcatlipoca, which is now known today as Mexico City. So when Kimber was asking Louise, where is Tezcatlipoca? Why, right here, of course, Louise said. Of course, Tezcatlipoca is Mexico City. And so the holograms that are now in their Jeep is heading towards the nearby village. According to Luis, he told Rhea that it's not that far away. So by the time that the holograms arrived at the village, Luis suggested that we should stop there for lunch. So that's what they did. But here comes another problem. Luis and his men, and along with the holograms, Rio and Video, saw that the village itself is in ruins. And worst of all, it's empty. Well, except for that one kid named Paco. We're about to meet him a little bit later. Then Luis explained to Jim and the holograms, and along with Rio and Video, what had happened. That just a couple weeks earlier, there's been an earthquake. So Video made a suggestion that she should get a camera. She figured with the shots of the village, I'm sure that the people may have some clothes and food. So Video went to the back of the truck to get her camera, but then someone took the bag of apples and along with the rest of the food. But what Video doesn't realize is that someone took her camera as well. So Video chased after the child that took her camera and a bag of apples and the rest of the food. Okay, like I said, that's Paco. He just took a bag of apples in Video's camera. That was until he tripped, and that accidentally caused him to spill a bag of apples everywhere in Video's camera. So back with Paco, who still has Video's camera, who was chased by Video, and that's when Paco was spotted by Rhea. When Rhea spotted Paco with Video's camera, she, along with Kimber and Jim, went after Paco. Back with Paco with Video's camera, he was about to get away. That was until Louise catches him in the act, and that's when Paco bumped into him by accident. So Louise, after catching Paco and along with Video's camera, so Jim told Louise after Louise picks up Paco, you can let him down now, and so that's what Louise did. And then Rhea shows up to Paco minutes later. Rhea wanted to know if Paco can speak English, and that's when Paco in response said that of course he could. So when Video takes her camera back, she says, all right, you got some explaining to do, young man. So when Paco was busy eating in the back of the truck and Jim sitting next to him, that's when Jim wanted to know if Paco has any family of any kind. But Paco told her no, and that he was all by himself. So Paco looks up at Rhea and says, you're from America, right? That's right, Rhea said. So Paco wanted to know from Rhea if she can take him. The reason why he wanted to go with Rhea in the holograms and including Jim is because he wanted to see what it was like. People are rich and have fancy cars and houses and etc. Then Rhea told Paco, you don't have to be rich to go to America. So Jim told Paco, I wish we can take you, but we can't. But Paco says, you have to take me. I must. I have to go there. So after Paco got upset, he ran off. Jim tries to run after Paco, but Louise wouldn't allow it. He says, oh, come on, just let him go. You did what you could. There's nothing else we can do. So Louise assures Jim that the village would take good care of him. But in the meantime, the holograms, along with Rio, Video, or Vivian for sure, must head to the Aztec temple. And of course, a couple of Louise's men in their jeeps. Video, or Vivian for short, was looking at her watch to say, I hope we can reach the Aztec ruins by nightfall. If we have any more delays than that, I'll never make it to the festival in time. So Luis, who agrees with Video, said that he's getting worried that the earthquake will damage the bridge before they can reach it. But then seconds later, something or someone sneezed in the back of the Jeep. But when Louise and Video looked behind them, it's Paco, the same kid from the village. He's just snuck a ride in the back of the Jeep. Even Rio and Jim couldn't believe it. Paco had just hitched a ride in the back of Louise's truck without them noticing. So when Paco says, make sure you take me to America. And that's when Video says, oh, great. So Video told Louise we had to take Paco back to the village. But Louise told Video that they can't right now because, as he says in his case, that Video has a schedule to run. So Louise suggested that they could drop Paco at the village on the way back. So good news, the three Jeeps had arrived at the metal suspension bridge. Also the good news, Louise assured his men that the bridge is safe. So Louise gets back into the first Jeep with Rio, Jim, Video, or Vivian for short, and young Paco, and they were about to cross it when something just feels off. It's an earthquake. Things look bad for the good guys. That was until, good news for Louise, he managed to back the Jeep up to join up with the rest of the Jeeps that didn't go with the first Jeep. But the bad news is that, thanks to the earthquake, the bridge is gone. So even though Louise had appreciated Rio's compliment, but now here comes the bigger problem. How can they get across the river to the ruins now since the bridge is destroyed thanks to the earthquake? If that's not bad enough, the good guys then spotted a helicopter that's flying by. Well, thanks to Rio looking at the helicopter through his binoculars, look who's inside the helicopter. The helicopter pilot, along with the Misfits and Eric, they were in the helicopter. Also by surprise is Video's cousin Clash. She's also in the helicopter. Video just couldn't believe it. Her own cousin in the helicopter. And she just told the others, oh, it's hopeless. They'll probably make it before we do. To the festival, that is. Video even said that here comes something even more worse. That the mistress had known about the secret location before she did. Jim tries to cheer up Video the best way she knew how. So Jim did that by apologizing to her best friend. So after the helicopter left, that's when Kimber says, now what are we going to do? But then Paco suggested that there's another way to get across. He says, I know a way. And Luis just dismisses him and said that there's no way because the bridge that was destroyed recently thanks to the earthquake was the only bridge that was available. And Luis says that the reason why he knows this is because he saw on a map. I don't care what the map says, Paco said. Then it's Rhea's turn to make a suggestion, to say maybe we should listen to Paco, because after all she says in her case that Paco knows the place better than we do. Back with the Misfits and along with Eric and their helicopter pilot in the helicopter. So that's when Pizzazz said to the helicopter pilot, let's go around again. But then the helicopter pilot wouldn't allow Pizzazz to touch the helicopter controls. So because of the fight that both Pizzazz and the helicopter pilot had, it caused the helicopter to go out of control. Back with the good guys now in their three Jeeps, good news they found a rope bridge, thanks to Paco. So as the first Jeep was crossing the bridge first, Paco explains that his grandfather had built it long ago. Well, good news, Louise in the first Jeep, along with Jim, young Paco, Rio, and Vivian, or Video for short, had made it straight across without an incident. Then the other two Jeeps had followed soon after. Back with the Misfits, now that their helicopter has crashed, thanks to Pizzazz, and of course, along with the Misfits are the helicopter pilot and Eric. Eric was in shock. He just couldn't believe it. He says, we're alive. Oh, thank goodness we survived. And that's when Clash said that there's a temple up ahead. That was right after Pizzazz demanded to know from Eric, where did you get this helicopter? Clash, however, made a suggestion that since she's shooting the video and there's a temple up ahead, the mistress was suggested by her that they should follow her. But Roxy and Stormer had dismissed the idea, and they said, "Are you crazy? We're walking now?" That's when Jetta had told Clash that you're out of your mind. So Possessor was asking Clash a question. So what are we? Pack mules or something? So now they had no choice. The mistress, along with Eric and the helicopter pilot, decided to follow Clash. Back with the holograms and along with Rio, Video, or Vivian for short, Paco and Luis, they made it to the Aztec temple. Now the holograms can tell how beautiful it looks. Then Rhea says, "It's wonderful than I can imagine. It's like being in the other world or something," Jim said, who agrees with Rhea. So then Video says, "I have a friend of mine that can shoot a documentary just like this." Video also suggested that it can help out the Mexican government. So Kimber was asking Sheena, where did the misfits go? I wonder what happened to them. Sheena, who agrees with Kimber, says they should have been here by now, right before we do. Then Rhea and Louise began talking to each other, so Rhea goes first to say, "I feel like it's like home, right here." As a matter of fact, Louise says, it's part of your culture. It's part of your heritage. It's in your blood. Even Louise says that centuries ago, Aztecs had their celebrations and dance right here, just like they did centuries ago. So Paco wants to know from Jim if she and her friends like it in Mexico. Of course we do, Jim said. So we go into the entire montage of Aztec enchantment by the holograms. It was during the entire song that the holograms could imagine what it's like to be back in Aztec times many centuries ago. When the song came to an end, the last thing that the holograms saw was the Aztec calendar. That's very well known. But then suddenly, the holograms, along with Rio, young Paco, Louise, and of course Video, or Vivian for sure, just heard an archaeologist says, "You knock off this racket this minute." "Just what was that all about anyway?" the archaeologist asked. "Well, it's just music, that's all," Jim said. "That's your opinion," the archaeologist said. So Video went ahead and introduced herself, and of course, introduces to her friends to the archaeologist as well. So then the archaeologist introduces himself as Dr. Barbasar. Young Paco, however, mistakenly believed that he's the doctor that studies medicine. "I don't think he means that kind of doctor," Rhea said. So Jim explains the situation to the archaeologist to say, "We're here to shoot our video, right here." But the archaeologist wouldn't allow it because he's getting worried about treasure hunters that are coming here. So then it's Rio's turn to speak in his case to the archaeologist to say, "Look, the government has given us permission to shoot this video, so we have the right to be here as much as you do." Before heading off, the archaeologist, who's upset, told the holograms and her friends, "You will regret coming here." So after that, he heads off. Back with Clash and the Misfits, well, they found the temple all right, but not where Video and her friends were. Anyway, Clash is filled with joy and glee and says, "Video's not here. We did it. We've won. We've made it." But neither the mistress nor Eric or the helicopter pilot were aware is that Clash just took them to the wrong ruins. But Possess just brushes it off at first and told Clash, "For your sake, you better be right." However, Eric has his turn to ask Clash a question. "Why would your cousin Video be all the way up here?" "Well," Clash says, "there is one thing we have to admit. The ruins are in fact different in some way." "Well, we do have to give you that credit," Stormer says. "But Roxy has her turn to ask a question. Shouldn't we do it in the studio instead?" So surprisingly, Pizzazz made a suggestion by saying, "If the holograms can shoot their video here, then so can we." So we go into the Welcome to the Jungle song by the holograms from last season in episode 8, of course. So Clash did just like what her cousin did, shoot the Misfits video. And it was during the entire song of Welcome to the Jungle from last season that the Misfits can imagine what it's like for the holograms to be tied up in stakes and be burned at it, to say the least. So when that song came to an end, back with the good guys, As you can see, Clash's cousin Video is about to shoot the holograms video, but then Paco shows up and then asks Jim, "Can we go back now?" "We cannot go just yet," Jim said. "Besides, the video isn't done yet," Jim said. So Paco wants to know from Jim, "You will take me to America, right?" So now it's Rhea's turn to talk some sense into Paco and says, "We can't take you. You gotta understand. You belong right here in Mexico," Rhea said. So, ashamed, Paco said to the holograms, "I will go to America, you'll see," and then he heads off. And then he stood right next to the archaeologist who they've met just the day before, Dr. Balbasar. So Dr. Balbasar told Paco, "I have something to tell you." So Dr. Balbasar says, "If you come with me, I'll show you how you can get to America." That made Paco very happy. When Rio overheard the conversation, he can tell that something was off, but he decided to think nothing of it, so he brushes it off. However, Rhea and Jim sensed that something was off with the archaeologist because he seems to be getting along with Paco. So back with Paco and the archaeologist, Dr. Barbasar, now that they're inside the temple. So what Dr. Barbasar did is that he needed Paco to do a favor for him. So Paco says, "If I do this favor, will you take me to America?" "Of course," Dr. Barbasar said. So what was that favor that Paco wanted for Dr. Barbasar? I can't say for sure. So anyway, back with Paco, he told Jim that there was something that he needed to show her, so she went along with Paco. Now Jim can tell that there was something off with Paco and wants to know from him, why can't we just bring the holograms here too? "Well," Paco says, "Dr. Bulbasaur told me that there is something that only you can see. So when Jim looked over her shoulder, there's a sacrificial well up ahead." But then Jim soon realized that Paco ran off. So Jim went to investigate the well that she saw up ahead. So Jim went ahead and looked at the well that Paco had told her about, and then looked inside, but she didn't notice that Dr. Bulbasaur was right behind her. So now that Jim is face to face with Dr. Bulbasaur, what he did is that he pushes Jim into the well, and she fell right down below until finally she landed into the water. Luckily, she's okay. And what Dr. Bulbasaur did next is that he left Jim inside the well. Jim should have known that at that time it was all part of the plan. Back with the holograms, they, including Rio, Video, or Vivian for short, and Louise were looking for Jim everywhere but couldn't find her because they were unaware that thanks to Dr. Bulbasaur, he just earlier pushed Jim into the sacrificial well. Now Shayna sensed that something was off. She says, "This is not like Jim at all, to go off without saying a word or to let us know where she went." Rhea and Rio, who agree with Shayna, and said that Bulbasaur may have something to do with it, but the problem is they just couldn't prove it, and they had no idea what to make of it. So Rio and his friends continued their search. When back with Paco, he went back inside the temple to meet up with Dr. Bulbasaur. So Paco told the archaeologist, "I did what you said to do." So Paco wants to know if the archaeologists have found her. "Oh yeah, I did. And you know what I did? I put her in a sacrificial well," the archaeologist explains. So Dr. Bulbasaur told Paco, "Get out of my way." "But you promised you'd take me to America," Paco said. So Paco told the archaeologists that they should go right this minute. But Dr. Bulbasaur refused and then told Paco, "For the last time, move out of my way." That's when Paco should have realized it was all a lie. So Paco asked a question. "So what you're saying is it's all a trick? You lied to me?" So Paco demanded to know, "What have you done with Jim?" So Paco was grabbed by the shirt by the archaeologist, and then the archaeologist just said, "Well, maybe you'd like to see for yourself." So Paco, using his defense skills, manages to get away. And so the archaeologist told his men, "These Americans are ruining my plans. We gotta get out of here." Paco, meanwhile, was looking for the holograms everywhere, but Paco was unaware that they were already inside the temple. Back with Rio and his friends, they were looking for Jim inside the temple. But then when they looked inside the big room, they found it weird that it was empty. Louise finds it very weird also that none of the treasures were there. They were gone. And that's when Rio told Louise, this is weird. This is not what an archaeologist does. And that's when he looked outside the window, there were trucks that were getting away with all the stolen treasures. So Louise and Rio, they know what to do. They got into the Jeep and started chasing after the truck with the stolen treasures. Well, the good news for Louise, after the short lived chase, the Jeep managed just to run the truck off the road. Finally, the truck that went out of control crashed into the trees. So back with Paco, who made a regretful decision, now realizes that he must save Jim. So after he heard Jim's voice saying, I'm down here, get me out of here. And that's when Paco says, hang on. And so he ran off to get some vines there from nearby. Well, good news, he got some vines. And once he did so, he threw the vine down to where Jim is. So it's now up to Jim to climb herself out. And good news, she got herself out of the well, thanks to Paco. So back at the campsite, now that the henchmen were all tied up thanks to Louise and Rio, so now it's Rhea's turn to face with the archaeologist to ask, how could you steal something that belongs to the people of Mexico? So what she is telling the archaeologist that stealing is wrong and that the treasures belongs to the government and etc. So that's when the archaeologist says, please don't arrest us. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll split the money 50-50. But Rio says that he isn't interested and wants to know what did the archaeologist do with Jim and where was she? So the archaeologist told Rio and his friends, I'll do something even better. I'll take you to her. So inside the temple, the good guys did not have any idea that just earlier Jim had been rescued thanks to Paco. So speaking of which, back with them, Paco and Jim, that's when Paco explains to how Dr. Barbasar had tricked him all along and that he was going to take him to America, but he didn't. And of course, Paco said in his case that he had never intended to let anything happen to Jim, and now he's felt guilt ridden about it. I understand, Jim said. So back with Rio and his friends who were following the archaeologists to the secret tomb. But by the time they arrived, that's when they realized they weren't alone. They saw an old man who introduced himself as Dr. Bulbasaur. Yep, you've heard right, the real deal. And that's when the hologram should have realized that it was all a trick and that the archaeologist that they followed earlier was a fake. So when the archaeologist, the fake archaeologist, locked up Rio and his friends, he said, surprise! That's when he accidentally let slip to introduce himself as Ramon. Now you're probably wondering, why did Ramon do all this? He wanted to smuggle all of the Mexican treasures away from the government, and he wanted the real Dr. Bulbasaur out of the way. Rio and Luis should have realized that it was all part of the plan. As for Jim and Paco, with the Love Will Show the Way song, that's when they had to hurry. So Jim and Paco knew they had to find Rio and his friends. Unfortunately, he had been locked up thanks to that creep Ramon Chavez. Anyway, when the song came to an end, they didn't have to look very far because Jim and Paco have heard the voices between the real Dr. Bulbasaur and, of course, Ramon. So the real Dr. Bulbasaur goes first to speak in his case to tell Ramon that the treasures belong to the Mexican government and its people. And of course, Ramon says, true, but now they belong to me. And of course, he said, and I quote, that someday an archaeologist will find you and along with your friends, and when they do, you'll be nothing but bones by then. Then suddenly Paco comes out of nowhere to attack Ramon, but just like what Ramon did the first time, he picks up Paco by grabbing his shirt. However, Jim knows what to do. She decided to contact Synergy. And what was the favor that Jim needed from Synergy? To create a couple of Aztec gods, of course. The first thing that the Aztec god told Ramon is to release Rio and his friends, and on top of that, to return all the treasures that both Ramon and his henchmen had stolen. So Paco ran off, and then, of course, when Ramon tries to attack one of the Aztec gods, it went through him. So finally, Ramon says, "Please don't hurt me. I'll return the treasures. I'll let out the good guys." So you know what this means. Ramon is now being arrested and along with his henchmen, back with the Misfits and along with Eric and of course the helicopter pilot, are now trying to leave the jungle. Stormer the Mistress just heard some jeeps coming from nearby. She says, "It's a car! We're saved!" So she, and along with her bandmates, Eric and the helicopter pilot, went up to the jeeps. And of course, when two of the jeeps pulled over, that's when they got in and says, "Get us out of here!" So you know what this means? That means thanks to the real Dr. Barbasar, Jim not only got her friends back, but Ramon and his henchmen, who are now arrested, are going to jail. Back at the village, now fully restored, because there's some good news. Thanks to the real Dr. Barbasar, he's been credited by the Mexican government by returning all the treasures to his rightful people. And of course, the holograms owed it all to Paco. He deserved the credit. Of course, what's even more better is that Rayo thanked Paco for everything that he did. Of course, Jim says there's some even better news. They can now take him to America, but then Paco soon changes his mind. And when Aja asked him why, and that's when Paco said, "Well, I do belong in this village after all. I wanted to build something great one day, something that Earth cannot be knocked down, something that Earth cannot be shaken, because he said that the Aztecs has built something on top of it." Then Paco said that he wanted to get a better education one day. And so that's what he did. Back with video, not only she made it to the festival on time, she won the video award. So when the press asked her what's she going to do with all that prize money, well, she said that she wants to do something even better, to get Paco a better education, with a little help from Jim, of course. And of course, they weren't kidding, because in the classroom we see Paco looking out the window while the teacher explains the Aztecs, their history, and the Mexican culture. So when Paco looks out the window, he sees an eagle with a snake landing on a cactus. And so that ends episode 9.